What's going on, guys? Excited to be back here with another video. We have a good matchup here on Thursday Night Football this week. The Miami Dolphins, who are 4-3, are traveling to the Houston Texans, who are also 4-3 and 7.5-point favorites going into the game. The over-under on this game is 44.5 points. And a couple interesting things about each team here. The Dolphins are missing a lot of their starters on offense. Ryan Tannehill is still out this week, which means it's still Brocktober for all you guys into the memes. And Brock Osweiler, actually, I did a little statistical pairing up with him and Ryan Tannehill on the season. Brock Osweiler is actually outperforming Tannehill statistically in most categories: touchdown percentages, passer rating, interception ratio, all sorts of different categories. Brock Osweiler is actually playing better than Tannehill was coming into this week. So what that means is I guess the quarterback play hasn't really dropped off, even though the starter is going to be on the bench. Other than Osweiler and Tannehill's situation, Kenny Stills, one of the starting wide receivers, as well as Albert Wilson, both not playing this week after getting injured in the Lions game last week. Albert Wilson was added to the injured reserve list this week. Charles Harris, the first-round pick from just a couple of years ago at defensive end for the Dolphins, also will not be playing. Now, the injury update on Deshaun Watson, I'm sure everybody knows about the situation that he had going to Jacksonville last week. He wasn't able to fly on the team plane because the team doctors were worried about his physical being. They figured it was best for him to travel to the game by bus, so he actually took a 12-hour bus ride to Jacksonville for the game, and then another 12-hour bus ride back from Jacksonville after the game was over, which means he's playing on Thursday after coming off of 24 hours of bus travel. He's going to probably be a little tired coming into this game, would be my guess. So coming into this game on the road, Miami is 1-2. They lost to the Bengals. They lost to the Patriots on the road, but they did pick up a win in week 2 against a pretty young Sam Darnold and only his second ever start. But all of their road games have been decided by more than the spread, more than 7.5 points. Now, Houston at home this season, they're 2-1 at home. They picked up wins over Buffalo and over Dallas, and a few weeks ago they actually lost to the Giants. Now, only one game on the season have the Texans actually covered what the spread is for this week, 7.5 points. Every game for the entire year for the Texans has been decided by a touchdown or less, except this past week against Jacksonville when they were playing against Blake Bortles and Cody Kessler, who are both mediocre at best quarterbacks, and a team without Leonard Fournette at running back, with Carlos Hyde, who just joined the team. So that was a pretty ragtag offense that the Jacksonville had on the field, playing against the Houston Texans, who have a pretty good defense this year. Now, statistically, these teams are pretty similar. So on third down, Houston's only converting 38% of third downs. Miami's only converting 37%, almost identical there. Houston's allowing 42% of third downs to get converted, while Miami's allowing a pretty big number of 46%, but those numbers are still pretty close. Both teams are +2 in the turnover ratio on the season, so those are almost identical numbers as well. They both have the same record, both being 4-3. Now, where the numbers start to differentiate a little bit, one of them being in the sacks category, Houston has 19 sacks on the season, while Miami only has 11, so they've done a much better job getting to the quarterback. But when it comes to protecting the quarterback, Deshaun Watson's been sacked 26 times this season in only 7 games. That's not good, and that's the reason why he had to take that bus trip to Jacksonville, because how often he gets hit this season from defenders because his offensive line's not able to protect him very well. Now, the Dolphins have only allowed 15 sacks, a couple of them coming last week against the Detroit Lions. Now, in the running game, Houston's only allowing 92 yards on the ground throughout the season, so they've done a really good job of stopping the run, while Miami, after last week's debacle against the Lions, they're now allowing 137 yards on the ground per game. Pretty big disparity there, and definitely leans in the favor of Houston. The Texans are scoring 22 points a game, while Miami is scoring about 21.5, so those numbers are pretty similar. But when it comes to, I was talking about the running game, while Houston's only allowing 92 yards and Miami's allowing a pretty big number, Lamar Miller, the starting running back for the Texans, is only averaging 3.9 yards per carry on the season and only has 1 rushing touchdown. So Miami has the opportunity to keep them from gaining a lot of yards on the ground. When you look at some of the numbers this season, one of the things that really stood out to me that was really surprising, Miami has only attempted 7 field goals on the season. How is that even possible? 7 games into the season, you only attempted 7 field goals? That's 1 a game. Houston's attempted 20 for reference here. But I guess what that means to me is either Miami does a great job of scoring when they get down into the red zone, and they have scored more touchdowns on the season than Houston has, or it means they're not putting themselves in scoring position nearly enough on the season. The Texans have attempted 3 times as many field goals as the Dolphins have on the season, so that's something to factor in when you think about the scores. Now, again, we talked about some of the different rushing numbers. The Texans, as I mentioned, they score 22 points a game. They're only allowing 20 points per game to be scored on them, and over the past 3 weeks, they're currently on a 4-game winning streak. they've only allowed 12 points per game in the last 3 weeks. That's really good. Now, granted, some of the teams they played against were not very good, so I guess that would make a little bit more sense. But 12 points per game, nonetheless, their defense has done an incredible job of keeping teams off of the scoreboard. The 3 keys for victory for each team this week, in my opinion: the Houston Texans, they have to stop the run. Miami's been very inconsistent this year in running the football. They have not done a good enough job of getting one of their 2 running backs going throughout the game. Maybe once every other game they do, but typically when Miami does run the ball well, that's when their team does well and they are able to win games because they can run clock and they can be a lot more creative with their play calling. This season they have not done a good enough job of that, and with some of their receivers being injured this week, they have to be able to run the ball well. For Houston, they have to be able to get after Brock Osweiler, get some sacks. They've done a good enough job on it this season. Jadeveon Clowney and J.J. Watt combined for about 11.5 sacks this season, and if they can create 3rd and long, the Dolphins have not done a good enough job this season of converting 3rd downs. I think one of the biggest frustrations Dolphins fans have is when they watch the Dolphins play on 3rd and long, they typically just give up. They do screens, they do draws, they do drag routes. They rarely ever attack the sticks. They're too comfortable just trying to play it safe and not pushing the ball down the field where they might get a turnover, basically just giving up on 3rd and long and having to punt. So if Houston can do that and create those 3rd and long situations by sacking the quarterback, they're going to be in a really good spot this game. The other thing they need to do is just simply protect their quarterback. They've given up 26 sacks. They cannot allow that trend to keep going this week against Miami. If 1, they want to win the game, and 2, they want to keep their quarterback in for the rest of the season. So for Miami, going off of that, they got to get after the quarterback. They have to go chase down Deshaun Watson. They have not done a good enough job protecting him this season. Miami has an opportunity to create some 3rd and longs and to give themselves better field position so they can try and up that 7 attempted field goal number on the season by getting themselves the ball in enemy territory more often throughout the game. Biggest matchup of the game, in my opinion, you have Xavier Howard and DeAndre Hopkins playing against one another. That should be a fun one. Xavier Howard is an up-and-coming corner in the league. A lot of Dolphins fans think he could be one of the elite corners in the league, but he hasn't really had the chance to prove himself too often on the national stage. Well, here it is. He's been one of the best corners in the league over the last year and a half, and DeAndre Hopkins over that same time period has arguably been the best wide receiver in the league. Xavier Howard, if you want to prove your worth and you want to show everybody how good you really are, this is probably the best opportunity you're going to get in quite some time to do so. Finally, for the Dolphins, I mentioned a little bit earlier, they have to establish the run. They have to be more creative in their play calling. When you have guys like Kenny Stills and Albert Wilson who aren't playing in this game due to injury, you're going to have to get the ball going on the ground. You cannot rely on some of your backup receivers and Brock Osweiler to go ahead and win you the game. Most likely that's not going to cut it against a team that over the last 3 weeks is only giving up 12 points a game. And with that being said, when you look at the spread, I think the best bet in this game is betting the under. 44.5 points. The Texans have not been scoring a lot of points here recently. The Dolphins are really banged up on offense. I just don't really see this being a high-scoring game whatsoever. Both defenses have been pretty decent throughout the season. The Texans have had a pretty good defense. Both offenses have been kind of lackluster recently. The Dolphins and the Texans' average points per game don't even add up to 44. I would go ahead and just bet the under on this game as the best bet. But if you do want to bet the spread, I have the Texans winning this game 24-17. That would be a 7-point differential, meaning the Dolphins would cover by half a point. So watch out for how the line shifts this week. I think with 7.5 points, the Dolphins would probably cover. If that number bumps up even higher, definitely I would stick with the Dolphins. If that number moves to even just 7 or 6.5 points, I'd probably take Houston to cover in that scenario. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please press the like button. Feel free to subscribe and press that little bell next to the subscription button so you can hear my predictions for next week's video. Tell me who you think's going to win the game, and if you disagree with me in the comments below. Until then, thank you again for watching, and see you later.